Detours, brought to you by Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. It's rare when a talent as young as prodigy Charlie Cooper comes along, but it's even more rare to live up to the exceedingly high expectations in such a globally competitive sport. At only 17 years old, Cooper's taken the junior division by a storm, rising up quickly to the top in the ITF World Rankings. And while many of his goals have been realized, he already has his sights firmly set on Los Angeles 2028 and a quest to hopefully become a Paralympic gold medalist. Charlie, welcome. Boy, you've got a lot of miles under your belt for a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, thank you. It's awesome to be here and talking to you. I'm really excited.
Hey, when you got going in the sport, Charlie, did you notice any natural inclinations right off the bat, or did some of the local coaching staff where you were located at home, was there something that did someone come over and go, "Hey, man, you got this. You should really pursue this"?
In the beginning, there wasn't any of that. It was my first time trying out in a wheelchair since I would walk with leg braces my whole life. So when I first hopped in the wheelchair, it was definitely not natural for me. So learning how to hit with the tennis racket and push was all new. So I definitely looked like, never touched anything like this before. So I think it took a few months, but I think one thing that is a good trait about me is I'm very coachable and I love to learn from anyone. So learning how to do a wheelchair, how to hit a one-handed backhand was something I loved, and I'm still open this day to learning from anyone. So I think that was a good trait about me in the beginning, and why so many people wanted to help me more, and I learned so much really quick.
So when you were using leg braces and then you went to the chair, did you notice something pretty cool about the use of the chair? I mean, I know a few guys going back years, who had dealt with polio, and then as soon as they got involved in any kind of chair, they noticed that their mobility actually increased in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like, when I was born, the doctors told me I wouldn't be able to walk. So it was a miracle 2 years later that I was actually able to walk. So once I found wheelchair tennis, I wasn't really too sure if I wanted to do it. My parents and the doctors always told me, you need to walk. You need to lose weight to want to be able to walk, because that was the miracle of my life. And so going in a chair at first, I was kind of scared. I thought I was going to be less able. I thought, I was going to be seen different. But really, I hopped in the chair and I was so much faster. And I at these tournaments, I'm moving around with everybody else in a chair. I'm super fast going to Disneyland. I'm getting around so easy. I'm not getting tired. That was a big thing. My back would get really tired walking. It still does if I go long distances. So
Oh, I could
that helped me a
clearly see.
lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could clearly see that. Hey, so you really moved up pretty quickly. It did take a few years. You had to, understand the game. The game is pretty complex, but as you moved up, you went right up into the rankings. And the first time that, I mean, when you really started to make your bones, you beat Ivar van Riet from the Netherlands in two straight sets at the U.S. Open, and you were the first American to do that since the inception of the U.S. Open. That must have been a pretty proud moment.
Definitely the biggest moment in my life so far. And I was at the debut of junior wheelchair tennis at the U.S. Open back in 2022, and I lost first round there. But since that first event, I always wanted to win the junior Grand Slam. That inspired me from that first time, and with it being in New York, my home country, that inspired me even more. And I had my family there, my coaches there, and even my urologist from when I was a kid came over and watched. And it was a full circle moment. And with everybody there supporting me in my home country, it was the biggest moment so far. And definitely, I think still inspires me now. I knew I just wanted to shoot for the men's now after that one. Just that winning feeling, that second I won the match was everything. And it shows, what you work for and what you inspire others to also do.
Hey, I know you guys, especially in the tennis world, you're kind of stat freaks. You guys like percentages and stuff. And I noticed that going into that match, that the overall winning percentages for you were 67% and for Reet, 88%. You probably knew that. Did that get in your head in any way, or did it inspire you to want to play him even tougher, that you were coming in the underdog?
Yeah, so we kinda have the same dynamic in stand-up tennis, some of the juniors will stick to the junior events and some juniors play up, and that year, I was playing tons of men's tournaments, losing a lot. So, that overall affected my percentage there, a lot, and I won my first men's tournament that year too, experiencing that kind of ball, and so, in a way, although the percentage might look off, it really gave me confidence by playing those men's tournaments, and even though I lost, a lot against some top 30 players, I felt really, really good going in it. I mean, if I could beat the men's players, I could beat junior players. And Ivar was a very established junior player. He made it to the finals of the French Open that year. And he won a lot of events in Europe, which, really helps, your percentages overall. So that's the way I looked at it. And, I don't, I gained confidence out of that.
So you recently made a move from Palm Springs, your home, to Orlando, Florida, which is the home of USTA, our tennis program, and you've taken on coaches with high merit like Jason Hewitt, and I mean now you're playing on a whole different level. What was the difference, and did you feel a jump when you moved from one program to the other? Was the move to Orlando a necessity for you to get better?
Yeah, I had a really good program. Like I said, I started out in the desert at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, and really stayed in the desert for the next 8 years, and with my coach Dwayne Big A down there. And I had a really good environment though. I, trained at a gym locally and had a physical therapist there at one point. So it was a good system. But, if I really wanted to take all the way, we have, legend Shingo Kuneta here in Orlando, who's learning English and then helping us juniors who I've worked with the last year. We've played tons of sets over the last year. And so with him here and other players like another junior, Tomas Majetic and Dana Mathewson here, it's it's really it was a no-brainer for me, if I really wanna take all the way, having this elite environment around me would really boost that, and, being able to train all at the same site is amazing, and having that access here is huge. Saying my family loves it out here, so, we made the move, and it's been great so far.
Hey, I talked about expectations at the top. Do you feel the pressure of the expectation or do you embrace the expectation?
Yeah, I think I try to embrace expectation the most, in our sport, there's never like a really good timeline of, how juniors will transition into the pros yet, especially with these grand slams. So, taking each step is pretty new for me and all the other juniors around me, how that transition is going to happen. And so for me, it's more about doing things right now, inspiring the younger kids. I think I keep expectations low by taking it off of the tennis, but how I can be an inspiration to the next people, how I can, be kind to others and be a good model of US tennis and how we could represent. And so I think that helps take the pressure off me. I'm doing things for others and not all for myself as, the sport was given to me at a guitar shop. I met another kid with spina bifida. So it was really a miracle that I found the sport in the first place. So being able to give back is everything. And that really takes the pressure off me. Win or lose, I think there's still a plan for me and everyone else that plays the sport.
Hey, I want to get on to your music, but before we do, let's talk a little bit about your tennis. So, uh, strong forehand. I watched you play. I only caught about 5 minutes of that match with Reet, and I could see, you're playing a lot of baseline, but you have a really strong forehand. You place the ball well. You have good maneuverability and instincts on the court. So those are your strengths. What are the things that you have to work on to get to that next level?
Yeah, so for my game, my backhand's always been super consistent. And at a point last year, it was way better than my forehand for sure. And
Really?
going to the US Open, my forehand actually, yeah, it was a really weapon. I think I kind of unleashed on that side a lot more, get a few more errors, but for me, it's more, tactically, I really try to finish the point too quick. I try to get a winner off the first ball, and so it's more, I gotta build the point more, and for me, both sides are solid. I love my backhand. I learned from Shingo, who has the best backhand down the line, and I love doing that shot now too. So I feel like both sides for me are pretty solid, but, working on tactics and building out the point is where I need to start working on.
Seems to me, just from what I see, that the dominant number of people who have risen to the top in this sport are righties. Have you ever faced a lefty? Do you lament facing a lefty? I mean, when you see a
Yeah.
lefty come out on the court, is it a whole different game?
Yeah, so our world number 1 right now, Takeda Oda, he's 19 from Japan. He's a lefty, and his serve is just so hard to return. I wasn't used to setting up, and Shingo actually had to give me advice on how to do it and give me a whole, like, mapping of the court and how I should come in and set up my chair. So that part is probably the hardest part for me, and sometimes I get into the wrong pattern. I'll hit, backhand cross court, but it's to his forehand. So I gotta start going down the line more. But it's definitely the patterns that are rough, and I don't like playing lefties. It's it's different, and but, it's cool. I love to adapt to it. Sometimes I wish I was lefty. I think it's pretty cool the kind of spin they get. So
We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Sports and Spokes Magazine. For nearly 50 years, they've produced stories on iconic athletes performing at the top of their game, given generational coverage of sports dating back to the 1970s, and they've shown the way with exciting and timeless magazine cover shots. To stay on top of all the latest news from the world of high performance adaptive sports, go to sportsandspokes.com. Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. All right. So I knew you played piano and guitar, but I didn't know you started that when you were only 6 years old, which is incredible. But I'm kind of curious. I see tennis in so many ways as an art form. Obviously, music is an art form. Do you see some way that those worlds meld together for you? Do they work together?
I I think for sure. And first of all, like, I think the obvious answer is the practice. If you want to be, if you don't want to show it to a recital and not practice, it's the worst feeling. I've done it sometimes where I didn't want to practice my song on my piano, and I show up to recital and just mess up the whole thing. So that's one thing that you could relate to. But the other thing is, I think especially on the piano, sometimes you wanna be soft with the fingers, and that's kinda like, holding the racket, I think I put it that way, you wanna be pretty soft sometimes and try kinda create the melody a little better, and when you're holding the racket too tight, things don't go well, and that's for everyone. So, I think being a little loose on the keys, that's kinda what I relate it to, and overall creativity for sure. Overall, I mean, I think musicians are super creative, and I'm still doing things with music, like music producing, and I try to create new things a lot outside of tennis. And I think, when it goes to the court, you're trying to find new things all the time and create special shots in the match. I think that only comes from musicians, and it's pretty cool to see. But that's something I started with. I was growing up doing worship music in school, and I got into electric guitar a little bit, and tennis kinda took over way too much, so I'm not doing too much music anymore, but it's always gonna be in my heart, and, I'll be able to play till I'm old, so it's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I saw that you did play number two in the world, Alfie Hewitt, in a doubles match. You've never played him in singles, correct? What would happen at this point in time, like tomorrow, Alfie Hewitt flies into town for kicks, and you and he get out on the court and you play, and you go ahead and play a match. How does it end up, Charlie?
I like to be confident, going to a match like I can win any match, that's something that Shingo Kaneda has given me. He's told me, "You gotta go to any match that you're gonna win." So, I don't wanna say I'm gonna lose, but, it's gonna be tough. He's a legend, and I was talking about this the other day. I don't know who I'm gonna get in the US Open, the main draw, but if it's him, I'd be really happy to share a court with a legend. And it's amazing. I've always looked up to him. But I trained with Shingo so much, and they had a great rivalry against each other. So, I think I'd probably do well, but he's really good, and I don't want to catch him on a good day.
I believe that. Hey,
Yeah.
at only 17 years old, you've dedicated a lot of your life to athletics, sports, tennis in particular. Do you feel in any way that the sacrifices you've made has it been worth it? I mean, you've given up some of your teen years doing those kooky things that kids just like to do. You sit around with your Xbox, you run down, and do a couple things, go swimming at the pool, but you've had to sacrifice a lot. You're working out a couple times a day. It's not easy. So have you made significant sacrifices in your teen years to get to where you're at?
for sure. And it started last year too when I had to make the switch from in-person school to online. That was huge, and that was like the one reason why I wouldn't do it, because I love the social life so much. And growing up, I've always had some of the best friends, and the valley's super small in Palm Springs. So, we go to the same elementary school, same high school. I've had the same friends forever. And so it was really tough. And now even making the move out here is another huge sacrifice. I'm not really going to see them unless I go back there. So it's tough for sure. And, yeah, I used to play Xbox a lot with my friends and doing all that stuff. Sometimes I still do it. I've got to get one out here. But no, that's the biggest. But something I talked about, with my mom was, finding purpose and finding, how to use a disability in the right way. And a lot of kids, are inside a lot with a disability, like I once was. And, sometimes they're depressed about it. And if you could play a sport, and, I'm blessed to be able to play competitively and win a US Open, if I could do that, then why not go all the way with it and try to use my disability for a bigger purpose? So that's what I'm doing now, and I think I'm really on page with that. I'm willing to sacrifice that. My friends are, supporting me always, so it's awesome. And also we meet a lot of friends on the tour too, so it's cool. But I
Yeah.
think I've sacrificed for the bigger purpose.
Yeah, and how many kids are globally traveling at your
Yeah,
age,
yeah.
right?
That's
Hey,
what my
man,
dad said.
not
Yeah,
to be redundant on the moment that you just mentioned, but I read something pretty interesting between an interaction between you and your mom, and the essence of it was that you and she sat down. And you were having this, I mean, pretty philosophical conversation about life, and she had asked you, would you, if you could play on the tour rather than have a disability, would you? And you answered yes. But then you go on to win the US Open, and then she asked you the same exact question. And she said, the night after you won, she asked you if you would still make the same decision. And you said more or less, no, I'd rather have the disability. I found the purpose I found. And I think it was a big changing point in my life. I think that's pretty poignant, man, for a young kid to come up with that. What purpose has sport made for you in your life, and how far do you think it can take you?
yeah, yeah. It's good. I mean, going back to the beginning of what I said, it's I my whole life, I go into PE with my friends, and, not being able to go to Disneyland like everyone else, it was really sad. And I always wanted to run like other people. And like I said before, tennis, play in the MLB, NBA, or just play on a competitive team. And I was never able to with the disability. So I was, I wish I didn't sometimes. And having that talk with my mom in the beginning of last year, I was feeling that way until I decided to go all in, and basically in search of a purpose that year. And I mean, put it that way. And even though I know I won the U.S. Open, I could say just because I won, I say that now. I mean, there's been some tough times for sure, where it's, although that question does still come up, but it's no. I think my faith has helped so much with that. I feel like God has a bigger purpose for me, and that's kind of what I need to stick to every day of my life. And so, yeah, I think the bigger purpose is to inspire others. And I think if I didn't have this disability, I would not be doing the same thing I'd be doing now. Probably just being, an average baseball player. My dad's 5'7", I'm not going to be that tall. So, I'm really blessed to be in this position, and I like to see it that God's working through me with a disability, and it's amazing. So I'm got to keep following His path and using this in the right way. So
Great
that's what I'm
philosophy.
clarified. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, man, let's have a little bit of fun. I talked to
All right.
David Hall, who is a great champion from the '90s and into the 2000s, and we were sort of laughing about music, so David liked to throw on a little metal, a little Anthrax and stuff, and he was getting ready to get out there on the court and play. So,
Yeah.
what's your walk up music, man? What do you got? What do you have streaming in your buds while you're getting ready to play? Are you all mellowed and chilled out and getting
Yeah.
cerebral, or are you working it?
Yeah, it's gonna sound crazy, but I listen to country music before I go out on court. I don't like listening to the fast stuff. It makes me too scared. I get too much energetic. But like probably like some Chris Stapleton. I don't know if you know Morgan Wallen. That's what I've been throwing on. But Jason Harnett, he listens to rock all the time. He tried to put me on AC/DC, but It's too much. It's too much.
Didn't
Yeah.
work quite the same, huh?
No, 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 not like the country music.
All right. So, young man, what's up for you with the next 2 years leading into the Paralympics in 2028? What do you have to work on? What's your focus? And how is it that you're going to go about achieving that gold medal?
Yeah, I mean, it starts this next month at the US Open. It'll be my debut in the men's draw, which is
Nice.
amazing. You know, being 17 years old, I'm really excited, and I was blessed to be given the wild card. So that's gonna be a huge step, and I hope to have a breakthrough. It'd be amazing, and from here, trying to win a Grand Slam is gonna be my biggest thing. Whether that's in the U.S. Open or Australian Open, anything. And with being here full time is going to keep doing that. But I think it's every day, working hard as I can, and on search for that goal and that greater purpose. When I have that in mind, I think I can do great things, and it really inspires me to work even harder. So that'll be it until the Paralympics in LA, where in my home state. So that's going to be amazing, and I can't wait. So I'll talk back to you then. Or
Yeah,
every
I
year we'll
think
talk
that'd be
about
really great.
it.
Hey, Charlie, really great young man. You got a lot of really positive aspects to your life and attitude. I see you going a long way. You have a lot of talent. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing today. And I do look forward to catching up with you as we move towards 2028.
For sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was awesome.